We're in James, the 5th chapter. It's the last chapter here, and so again, we're getting to the end here. James, the theme of James has been to exhort the readers to support with their lips what they say with their lives. To support with their lives what they say with their lips. It's very important for us, again, as we have talked about in James, that we understand that you can say you're a Christian. I can say I'm a Christian all day long. I can say it until I'm blue in the face. But if my actions don't show it, and my mouth doesn't show it, and the things that I do don't show it, you're not really a Christian. I can say it, but if I don't do it, it means nothing. And James has been talking about this whole time. How to act. We talked about James being the practical version, the Proverbs of the New Testament. And one of the consistent things through this is this idea of the tongue and their talk and how we interact with people, how we interact with other folks, and how we interact with the world, and how we interact with other Christians. And so we've been going through the study, and we're going to move past a bunch of this because this is the end of the 4th chapter. So we talked about the test of dependence, okay, last week. And now here we are in James 5. I want to roll it over here. I want to go back to verse 16 here, but before we run into James 5, because you do realize, of course, and we've talked about this before, how the chapter breaks are merely a construct of what we do. They didn't necessarily do that that wasn't in the original manuscript. James, when he wrote the letter to them, didn't stop and put chapter 5 and then go on like that. I would write a letter to Gail and say, "Dear Gail, how are you doing?" Chapter 1. That's not how they did it. All right. Verse 16, but now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. We talked about self-centered bragging must be replaced by God-honoring trust. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Therefore includes all of what James has mentioned up to this point. And again, your actions must coincide with the words that you say. If you're going to talk about being a Christian, you got to be a Christian. If you know to do good and you don't do it, that's just as much a sin as as doing something evil. All right? So now, James chapter 5. Let's take a look at it. We're talking about endurance. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are mothing. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in these last days. Indeed, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which kept you back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord of the Sabaoth. You have lived, verse 5, on the earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your hearts as in the day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the just. He does not resist you. Therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until he receives the early and latter rain. Verse 8, you also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. My brethren, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord as an example of suffering and patience. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure, you have heard of the perseverance of Job and seen the end intended by the Lord, that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful. Okay, let's stop there, and we'll do our verse-by-verse breakdown. There's supposed to be a picture there. Oh, well. There was supposed to be a picture there. Okay. He says in the first verse, come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. And now remember, James is addressing a primarily Jewish audience as he deals with this. And again, we've seen that throughout the letter. But he's dealing with a primarily Jewish audience, and so he said here, "You rich weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you." He's addressing the unrighteous wealthy and their misuse of resources. The problem with money is not money. What is the problem with money? The love of it. And what does the love of money lead to? I'm sorry? Lust. Okay, good. The love of money is the root of all evil, right? All right. Why is the love of money the root of all evil? Because you're putting that before God. Anything that you put before God is a problem. Why then is money such the big deal?
You feel like you're self-sufficient.
Okay.
You don't need God. You have the money.
Yeah. Why do I need God? God's not going to bless me. I mean, I look at all the stuff I got, right? Look at all the things I have. You know? Now, what is the problem with money? And we're going to talk about this in a couple of other slides, but what is the problem inherently, just from a worldly perspective? What's the problem with having a lot of money? Do what? Well, maybe not easily, but you can get robbed, right? You're always trying to protect it. What? You always want more. I've never met a rich person. There was a guy, I don't know if y'all heard about this. Crazy. It's nuts. I don't get it. They're going to go up in space on Jeff Bezos' rocket ship. Okay? 11-minute ride. 11 minutes. Some fellow paid $28 million to ride. I have no concept of that. You can get to heaven cheap. Well, right. Exactly. I got no concept. I have no concept of that. $28 million for 11 minutes. I mean, $28 million for, that's nuts. I don't get that. I don't understand that. And that's folks with, that's the stuff that money does. You want more, and you got to protect it. You got to take care of it. You got to make sure nobody gets it. And so you build up walls and you build up all this kind of stuff to make sure nobody gets my money, right? Nobody gets my stuff, all right? And the problem with stuff, it says your riches are corrupted and your garments are mothing. The problem with your stuff, and here's why you can't put your trust in your stuff, is because your stuff is going to go away. Your stuff is going to fade. Your stuff is going to tarnish. Your stuff is going to, all that stuff that you think is valuable in your house, in 50 years, let's be nice, in 100 years, gone. One of my buddies owns, down in Indiana, owns an auction house. And he said the toughest thing is to walk into somebody's house after Grandma Jones passes away and tell the grandkids that Grandma Jones' spit tune, isn't really worth, the value that they put on it. You might get a couple bucks for it. Your riches are corrupted and your garments are mothing. How did I miss verse 3? Where did verse 3 go? Where did verse 3? Hold on. We got to get verse 3. Verse 3 says, your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you. And you shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye heaped up treasure together for these last days. Oh my goodness, okay. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I went crazy here. Apologize. All right, let me get back to my slide. I apologize for that. Okay, there we go. 3's gonna be down there somewhere. All right. So yeah. Again. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you. And you shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped treasure together for yourself. We talked about this in chapter 4. The fact that people, that this all comes as when people die. It's ridiculous how silly people are about other people's possessions. I was talking with Brother John Cox about this, and he said it's crazy some of the things you see at the funeral home when families do this. I went through a thing here recently with one of Barbie's friends where just all kind of craziness, all surrounded by these little possessions. And they serve, verse 3 says, as a witness against you. All right, verse 4. Indeed, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you have kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord of Sabbath. One of the things that the Old Testament strictly forbidden, now this is a practice that was strictly forbidden by the Old Testament. What's happened here is you've got somebody, they go out, you hired them for a project. They go out, they do the project. Now they come back in, and you don't pay them. Or you don't pay them what you told them you would pay them. And he said, because one of the things that the way some people get rich is they deceive other people. They take advantage of other people. Okay? And so he says you've kept back their money by fraud. Leviticus 19:13 and like I said, Deuteronomy 24:14 and 15 talk about this particular practice. It says they cry out, and the cries of the reaper has reached the Lord of the Sabbath. Do you remember another time when the cries of the people reached the Lord? Revelation, okay. I wasn't thinking of that one, but okay. When else did the cry of the people reach the Lord? Israelites in Egypt. Yeah, Israelites in Egypt. When God's people are being oppressed and they cry out, now how do they cry out? Sorry? By praying. They cry out by praying. Very good. They cry out by praying. How long, O Lord, how long are we going to suffer like this? How long? How long, O Lord, will you allow them to oppress us? All right? And so this has reached up to the God of heaven. Now, let me ask you a question. You think the God of heaven would be happy if that happened? I don't think so. I think the God of heaven would be very upset. You tell somebody, yeah, a little kid comes up to you, says, hey, mister, can I mow your yard? Absolutely, kid. How much are you going to charge me? $20. Okay. So he goes out and mows the yard for $20, and he said, hey, unfortunately, I only have a $10. Yeah, but you told me 20. Hey, kid, I got $10. You want $10 or not? He just ripped him off. We call that ripping people off. We scam, fraud. This is what they were doing. He said, you have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your hearts as in the day of slaughter. The idea of pleasure is this idea of wanton pleasure. Just whatever the mind sees, whatever I can find to make myself happy, whatever I can find to get what I want. And the idea is that luxury leads to vices. They become consumed by pleasure. The problem was sometimes with people that are mega wealthy and all that kind of stuff is they want more. That only satisfies for a little while, so I got to go get that, and that only satisfies for a little while, and then I got to go get that. In California, when they started the lottery, they tracked, after about 2 years, they went back and they tracked all the $1 million winners. People that won $1 million. Do you know what happened to them after the first couple of years? They were all broke. Every one of them. Every one of them was broke. Now, and it started in California, you don't know this, most of the people don't know this, but when you win $1 million now, you have to go to a class. You got to go to a financial class. So hopefully you can keep more of your $1 million. Because what would you do with $1 million? I'd go buy a house. I'd go buy a better house than the one I got now. I love my house. Barbie wouldn't let me buy a better house, and I ain't moving. I'm just telling you straight up. After coming off that last move, I am definitely, and moving Barbie, she got more stuff than, anyway. All right. Shoes alone would cost a bunch of money, I'm telling you right now. I know, right. Quit paying attention. All right. So you go buy a house, and you go buy cars, and then Aunt Susie that comes over every 3 years from, Georgia stops by, and you buy her a car, and all of a sudden it's gone. You got to pay taxes on it. Oh yeah, the government wants their money, so you got to pay taxes on it. And it consumes you. It consumes the things that you do. Now, you says you have condemned, you have murdered the just. He does not resist you. You go from a progression of rich to hoarding to fraud to self-indulgent. And now they do anything to sustain their wealth. Even this idea is condemned is to sentence, using the courts to commit judicial murder. Bribing judges, bribing juries, hiring the best lawyer so they can get away with stuff. And I'm not saying anything about our court systems, but there's an inequity in our court system that if you have a lot of money, you can get by a better defense than if you don't. Now, before we go further, is there anything wrong with having a little wealth? Okay? Is there anything wrong with having money?
No, there are many people who have money who use it for good. They are generous with it.
Yeah.
That's how we get our cancer centers, the hospitals, and libraries, and things like that too.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not. So this class isn't I don't consider myself wealthy, but I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. So class isn't on if you've got a 401k and you got a bunch of money saved up and I'm not. Don't get me wrong, I'm not putting the kibosh on you. Okay, I'm not saying God's going to condemn you. All right. But what's James' point here? It's where it's placed in your heart. James's point is where it's placed in your heart. If we go back to the theme that we talked about, we live in our lives like we say with our lips. Is your trust in the money that you have, or is your trust in God? And the Bible consistently talks about, the Bible talks a lot about money. The Bible talks a lot about money. But it's not allowing money to become your God. I know some people that money is their God. Absolutely, money is their God. They worship it just like we worship God. In fact, they may worship it more. So there's nothing wrong with having a 401k or having money in the bank or having a savings account or having a extra house. Nothing wrong with any of that. It's just where you put your priorities and where you put your love and putting money ahead of God. Anytime money becomes ahead of God, we have a problem. Anytime anything becomes above God, we have a problem. Therefore, verse 7 says, be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until he receives the early and latter rain. The early rains came in October, November. That would soften the ground for planting. The late rains, March, April, just before the spring harvest. What's James trying to say here? What's he trying to bring forth? God does things in his own time. What's that? We got to be a little patient. Now, understand too that he's talking about well, why do these people get away with it? Why do these rich people get to oppress us? Why do these people take advantage of us? And God says we need to be patient. And he relates this to the farmer who has to wait for the rain. We got to wait. Let me tell you what, I want my crops to grow, and I want them to grow now. I'm planting my little tomato seed, and I just stared at it. Looked at it. Come on, let's go, tomato. It didn't move any quicker. You got to be patient. All right? He says, you also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Be patient. Establish your hearts. What does it mean to establish our hearts?
Well, when something's established, it's firmly rooted.
Okay.
Firmly rooted in your patience.
Okay. Being established is being firmly rooted. Okay. How do we establish our hearts? He says to establish your hearts. How do we do that? What's that? Prepare them. Okay. All right. Study the word. Study the scripture. Okay.
Well, as you're being patient, you're actually practicing dependent on God. So the more you practice something, the better you get at it.
Okay. Yeah.
You establish a habit in your heart.
Establish your hearts for the coming of the Lord. He says, be patient. My wife's sister came over to our house a couple years ago now and said, they diagnosed me with this cancer, and they gave me 6 months to live. And she said, what do I do? So I told her a couple of things, but one of the things I told her was this. You have the luxury, and it was a luxury, of knowing that your time is limited. You got 6 months. The rest of us are under this illusion that we're just going to live forever. And we're not. We all have a time that it's going to stop. There's going to be a time for each and everyone sitting within the sound of my voice, everyone within this building, everyone within this city, county, state, nation, where we will stop. He says, be patient. Establish your hearts. Get ready for that. Get ready for that. Because it's coming. As I told her, she had the luxury of knowing that it wasn't going to be a year, 2 years, or 4 years, 6 months. I don't know. As the old Texas preacher used to say, I could walk outside and get hit by a Mack truck. I was so scared of Mack trucks. I thought they were the worst drivers. But that's how we are. So James says, be patient. Understand that this stuff is just passing by. This stuff is just a short time period. We're only here for a little bit. He's going to talk about that in our next section. We're only here for a little bit. Be patient. But man, Cody, I've been hanging on for 75 years. Be patient. The farmer has to wait on the rain. Be patient. Because it's coming. So the pop quiz, you may not can see that, but when is the coming of the Lord? It's unknown. Again, could happen tomorrow. But for most of us, Cody's assessment, for most of us, the coming of the Lord is when we pass away. Don't grumble. Do not grumble against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. He goes back to talking about how we interact with each other, especially how we interact with other Christians. And it's kind of the concept of, I don't know if you remember this when you were in school, but did you ever have that time period when you were in school and the teacher left the room? And there goes the teacher. And she going down the hallway for something. We don't know what she's going on, but she's left the room. And for the first 3 or 4 minutes, there's no noise. We're working on our little project. We're working on our paper. She told us to read this something. And so we're working and reading the project and everything. And then somebody drops a pencil or somebody laughs. And little Susie Black used to go, I remember Susie, y'all better knock it off, teacher's going to come back. I don't know why she'd always say that to me, because I was a perfect child. You need to laugh so loud, Gil. All right. What? I was not throwing paper wads. Anyway. So, That's fine. That's fine. At least it was an appropriate ringtone. You're okay. So it's this idea and the concept that the judge is standing at the door. You're not really getting away with anything, because what happens is, because the teacher's coming back. We just don't know when. So don't be grumbling against people. Don't grumble. If we got a problem with a brother or sister, how do we take care of the problem with a brother or sister? I'm sorry? Go to them. Go to them. What's that? Well, go to the teacher. But before we go to the teacher, let's go to them first. Let's go to them. All right? Don't grumble against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. James says, we have those things that we need. God has given us those things that we need. Later on, we know that God gives us all things that pertain to life and godliness. We have those things that we need. Now, let's act like the people that we're supposed to be acting like. Verse 10, my brethren, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord as an example of suffering and patience. Pick a prophet, any prophet. Doesn't matter. Yeah, Jeremiah. Pick a prophet, any prophet. Doesn't matter. And what are the prophets? One of the things that you read about the prophets is the majority of them, my goodness, Did they have some suffering and troubles? Yeah. Why didn't you say Jeremiah? What was he called? Yeah. Yeah, the weeping prophet. Yeah. If you get a name like if you get a moniker like the weeping prophet, probably something going on there that's not pleasant. You're just crying all the time. Look at that guy. All he does is moan and groan and cry. These people spoke in the name of the Lord as an example of suffering and patience. A lot of stuff that we go through sometimes is hard, it's difficult. There are things that happen to us that, like, why did that happen? And we got to be careful sometimes because we think to ourselves, I've been a good Christian. We start lining up our list of great qualities. And the reasons that God should be, have his hand of protection on us. I'm a good Christian. I go to church every week. I give regularly. I help the poor. I'm a wonderful guy. I do all the great things. And we start lining up this list of stuff that God should be, impressed by. We got to be a little careful. That's what's your heart, yeah. And we need to suffer. Remember, he started out. Sometimes we're going to suffer. Remember, he started out the first of the letter with, be happy when trials come upon you. Okay? Through suffering and patience. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure. You have heard the perseverance of Job and seen the end intended by the Lord, that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful. So a couple things here. One is for those who doubt that Job was a real person. A lot of scholars, as we talked about in a couple class way back, a lot of scholars want to put Job in the category of, well, he was just a character. Job wasn't a real person. James cites Job as a real person. And he notes that the Lord was compassionate and merciful. And so the idea is that he's going to be compassionate and merciful to us if we are patient. I don't know. We're going to talk about this. I'm preaching the Sunday night lesson. We're going to talk about prayer. Just give you a heads up, but the concept and the idea is of prayer is sometimes we ask for things and we don't want to be real patient when we ask in our prayer. I have learned that I don't pray for patience anymore. I don't pray for patience. It sounds like a joke, and I promise you it's not. I was praying for patience one time, and a kid started screaming. Ah! Right in the middle of my prayer. Right in the middle of my prayer, Rob. And I had a good prayer going, too. I mean, it was a pretty awesome prayer. The kid just started screaming. I thought, well, I don't want patience right now. Wait a minute until I get done, But we have to be patient, and we have to wait on God. We're going to stop the class right there. I don't want to get into the last section, because the last section, I want to use the last section, and we'll wrap up everything we have in James. So we'll stop right there for today. Thank you for your questions. Anything else before we step off? All right, very well. Let's prepare for worship.